Hi, my name is AJ, and I've recently completed this game. It's Quest 64 for the Nintendo 64. A 3D RPG, essentially turn-based game, which is kind of what makes it interesting. I think at the time when it came out, if I can recall correctly, and I couldn't find any articles to support this, but it was being touted as the first RPG for the Nintendo 64. I went into some further research and realized that the reason why is because there wasn't a whole lot of RPGs for the Nintendo 64. I will say that this launched in June of 1998. Zelda was launched and came out in November of 1998. Now, The Legend of Zelda, which we may talk about on a later date, was a revolutionary game of its own making and was filled with nuance and depth and was a lot of game. I think it's technically something around the 45 hour mark of total gameplay involved. There was cutscenes, there was a lot of audio, and all of those things are kind of missing in this game. If I only had one critique of this game, it's that it felt rushed. So essentially you play this character right here, which is Brian, and he's off to look for his father, who went off to look for a book called the Ellentale. You essentially have to conquer 4 elements as you level up your own magical prowess in your own 4 elements, using a whole host of combat spells and buffing spells to defeat these bosses, and then you end up fighting kind of a literal deity in the end to restore peace to Celtland. Now, if that sounds like a lot, you're full of shit, because it's really not. It's not enough game for what it is. The Nintendo 64 had come off the heels of the Super Nintendo's legendary JRPG thing. I don't know what you want to call it. And I guess that there was some political stuff going on with Square Enix, Squaresoft, Capcom, all these companies that had been making these legendary games for Nintendo are now making them for PlayStation. It's a super bummer, because on PlayStation, you figure Final Fantasy VII came out in January of 97. Alright, so that's 18 months before this even dropped. If you ever played Final Fantasy VII, even the original PlayStation 1 version, which they just recently did a remaster, it's a lot of game. It's about the same as most Final Fantasy games, but they layered so much on top of it, and it was an exciting show-off of new technology. Now, they were using hand-rendered backgrounds, and they were still using turn-based combat, which is not as complicated as what's in this game, and I'll talk about that in a second. But there were cutscenes, and there was audio, which may have been easier because it's a CD-based and not a cartridge-based ROM system. This game has no cutscenes. The closest thing to a cutscene is they sort of will pan the camera point of view around a sprite. It's not the same as a true cutscene. There's no real voice acting, and that's just the beginning of where it sort of falls up short. The only thing that was interesting is the combat system is a ring within a ring system. It sort of made me feel something like Chrono Trigger, but it wasn't enough. The spells are interesting. The combat is almost interesting. The melee combat is simply that you're a magician that carries a stick, and if you run out of magic, you can hit people with the stick. The items in the game are single-tier items. There's no money, so there's no economy in the game. There's no sense of saving up money to upgrade your character. It's literally just grinding to level up to get the next set of spells, to get up the next. You only have 4 stats. You have HP, you have hit points, you have magic points, you have agility, and you have defense. And they're all just affected by being in constant combat. There's spells that buffer them, but there's no armor. There's no items that you wear. There's no customization of your character. which is a shame because it would have made the game a whole lot more fun. You go to stores that have inns, which don't take money because there is no money. They're only items. Some of the towns will have an item shop that will just give you bread, which is what restores hit points, health points to the ones that know. Or, you'll go to other stores that will give you colored wings. And the wings are like this warping system because they didn't have an ocarina to zip zap you around everywhere. But it's a pain in the ass because if you warp from one town to another, which there's rarely cause to do, you then have to go back into that store and get another set of wings. So it's a one-time use item that you use up, but it's free and you can keep getting it. It didn't feel very well thought out. It is a very straightforward quest. I mean, you really are. There's very little backtracking. There's one chunk where they almost felt like they had to add some obligatory backtracking. Like I said, the combat system is turn-based, but not in the way that we're used to with JRPGs, where every single character will get a turn. You have the enemy group that will get a turn, one person, and then Brian will get a turn. And then a different person in the enemy group, and then Brian will get a turn, which means that Brian's getting to do way more attacking than any single individual in any enemy group. And it sort of works, because the attacks and defenses are pretty well balanced out. And so that part didn't, like I said, the combat wasn't an issue. It can get a little monotonous. Some of the dungeons that you go through are less than creative. There's one decent maze in it that when you go and find walkthroughs you'll actually need a good map of the maze because you can get really lost at it. But everything else is just walking from one place to another and fighting monsters in between. Which I know sounds like every RPG, but it's not. The text, the dialogue, the storyline that was in everything seemed very shallow. Not very well written or thought out. But all in all, was a fun game. I think it's classified as having something like 10 and a half hours of playtime. And other than the amount of grinding I did to make defeating the final bosses that much easier, that's about right. There's just not a whole lot of zhuzh to the game. But it's definitely worth playing, and I had a good time beating it. So I hope you play it. Leave me a comment if you've beaten Quest 64 or if you've ever even tried to play it. Don't forget to smash one of those other buttons that people tell you to smash or whatever we're doing here. Anyway, my name's AJ and I'm going to go find something else to play.